Alright, so now the next thing that we'll be talking about is mechanism of fertilization, right? In the previous video, we had understood the basics of fertilization. What is fertilization, right? That is something that we have been learning since lower classes. Now we are going to understand the exact mechanism of fertilization, that, what are the events which are happening when a sperm is going to reach near the secondary oocyte or the female gamete. Alright, so let's start with the steps. So the first step is penetration of oocyte. Second is activation of oocyte. If you guys remember, the secondary oocyte which was released, it was arrested at the metaphase stage of meiosis II, right? So in the activation of oocyte, what is going to happen? That process has to get completed, right? And enzymes also have to be activated. Now the third step is amphimixis, the fusion of the pronucleus, okay, the fusion of the male pronucleus and the female pronucleus. Alright, so now let's start with the first step of mechanism of fertilization, that is penetration of oocyte. No matter how many spermatozoa slip through the gap in the corona radiata, only a single spermatozoa is going to fertilize and activate the oocyte, right? It is a very important point. जो corona radiata का gap है, उसमें multiple sperm slip कर सकते हैं, but successful fertilization is going to happen only via single spermatozoa. All right. Now that spermatozoa must have an intact acrosome. The first step is the binding of the spermatozoa to the sperm receptors in the zona pellucida, a thick envelope which is surrounding the oocyte, right? We have already talked about zona pellucida. No cells are present here. What is it made up of? It is made up of glycoproteins, right? It is made up of glycoproteins. Okay, so the first step is what? Binding of the spermatozoa with the sperm receptors in the zona pellucida. Very common receptor ZP3 receptor, इसके बारे में हम लोग बात करेंगे. This binding, it triggers the rupture of the acrosome. Okay, क्या हो जाएगा? Acrosome के अंदर pores हो जाएंगे. This is going to be the initiation of the acrosomal reaction. So there is formation of the pores in the acrosome reaction, and the hyaluronidase and the acrosin, we've already seen that acrosome के पास क्या present होता है? Acrosome के पास enzymes present होते हैं, right? It has these, in the simplest language हम लोग बोल सकते हैं digestive और hydrolytic enzymes यहाँ पे present होते हैं, which are going to help in the penetration of the sperm in the oocyte. वो जो उसके layers हैं, इतने सारे layers हम लोगों ने देखे हैं when we were talking about the structure of the oocyte, उसकी penetration में help करेगा. Alright, so the hyaluronidase and the acrosin, another proteolytic enzyme, then digest a path through the zona pellucida towards the surface of the oocyte. ठीक है, 3 enzymes हैं जिनका नाम याद रखना है, जो कि acrosome में main present होते हैं. एक तो हो गया hyaluronidase. Okay, second is zona lysin, and third is corona penetrating enzyme. ठीक है, ये 3 हैं जिन पे क्वेश्चन आता है, तो ये 3 नाम तो बिल्कुल याद रखने हैं. All right. Next, when the sperm contacts that surface, the sperm and the oocyte membrane, they begin to fuse, and this step is the trigger for the oocyte activation. All right, ठीक है. Next, now for fertilization to occur, a sperm cell must penetrate the following layers. बहुत important point है. कौन कौन से layers उसको penetrate करने हैं? देखो, granulosa cell करने हैं, उसको corona radiata करना है, उसको zona pellucida, ये सब layers जो हैं वो उसको penetrate करने हैं. Then only it will be able to reach to the secondary oocyte. The clear glycoprotein layer between the corona radiata and the oocyte's plasma membrane. कौन सी layer के बारे में हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं? It is talking about this zona pellucida, right? It is a glycoprotein layer. Right? Now the acrosome, a helmet-like structure that covers the head of the sperm, contains several enzymes. मैंने 3 important enzymes का नाम बताया है, वो बिल्कुल याद रखना है. Acrosomal enzymes and strong tail movements by the sperm help it penetrate the cells of the corona radiata and come in contact with the zona pellucida. Now one of the glycoproteins in the zona pellucida called ZP3 acts as a sperm receptor. Okay, it acts as what? It acts as a sperm receptor. Its binding to specific membrane proteins in the sperm head triggers the acrosomal reaction, the release of the contents of the acrosome. ठीक है, बाइंडिंग होगा स्पेसिफिक प्रोटीन से, उसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा है? एक्रोसोमल रिएक्शन स्टार्ट हो रहा है. द एक्रोसोमल कंटेंट्स दे विल स्टार्ट coming out. The acrosomal enzymes, they digest a path through zona pellucida as the lashing sperm tail pushes the sperm cell inwards. Now, although many sperm bind to ZP3 molecules and undergo acrosomal reaction, only the first sperm cell to penetrate the entire zona pellucida and reach the oocyte's plasma membrane is going to fuse with the oocyte. Alright, see here. This is the path of the sperm. Again a very important point. तो देखो sperm क्या क्या penetrate करके आता है? Corona radiata अगर penetrate कर लिया है, then zona pellucida, then it is going to fuse with the plasma membrane of the secondary oocyte and then ultimately cytoplasm of the secondary oocyte. So this is the path of the sperm. Once it approaches the secondary oocyte, उसको corona radiata, zona pellucida, इनको pierce करना पड़ेगा and then finally it is going to fuse with the plasma membrane of the secondary oocyte. Okay, so once this penetration of the oocyte is done, second is the activation of the oocyte. So it is the process by which oocytes arrested in the metaphase 2 of meiosis are stimulated to resume meiosis, right? Initially मैंने बताया था what is going to happen in the activation of oocyte. ये जो arrested stage था, ये metaphase 2 में arrested था, वो process start हो जाएगा वापस. Right? Now, oocyte activation involves a series of change in the metabolic activity of the oocyte. The trigger for activation is contact and fusion of the plasma membrane of sperm and oocyte. This is a very important point. ठीक है, बहुत important point है कि इस trigger का, ये जो activation of oocyte हुआ है, इसका trigger क्या है? तो जब fuse करता है sperm plasma membrane secondary oocyte से, ये trigger है इस चीज़ के लिए. All right. Now, following are the steps of the activation of oocyte. First is the formation of the reception cone. Second is metabolic activation. Third is block of polyspermy. So now we are going to see these things one by one. First is the formation of the reception cone. So reception cone में कुछ भी नहीं होता है. The plasma membrane of the oocyte, it is going to rise slightly. ठीक है, और एक cone जैसा structure बना लेगी, एक reception cone बना लेगी. Okay, so plasma membrane of the oocyte, that is oolemma, it rises slightly upwards and forms a reception cone to receive the incoming sperm. That is what the formation of the reception cone is. Then the second step is metabolic activation. It involves activation of the enzymes that cause a rapid increase in cells' metabolic rate, right? Increase in the metabolic activity is also important, right? Ultimately, there will be formation of zygote. So all these things are linked to that. Now, the cytoplasm contain a large number of mRNA strands that have been inactivated by special proteins. The mRNA strands are now activated, so protein synthesis, it is accelerated rapidly. All right. Third is the block of polyspermy, right? Polyspermy is not a natural thing. हम लोगों ने कभी भी ऐसा नहीं सुना है that one oocyte, it has been fertilized by many sperms, okay? So of course there are mechanisms. There is a fast block polyspermy, there is a slow block polyspermy. So with the help of these mechanisms, this polyspermy is blocked. All right, so let's talk about block of polyspermy. The third point, polyspermy is what? It is the entry of more than one sperm in the oocyte. Now, block to polyspermy is achieved by following two mechanisms. First is fast block to the polyspermy. Second is the slow block to the polyspermy. right? Fast block polyspermy, here what is happening, this process is accompanied by depolarization of the oocyte membrane. ठीक है, ये बहुत important point है. In the fast block polyspermy, what is happening, there is depolarization. Depolarization of oocyte membrane. Okay, due to an increased permeability of the sodium ions. Now, the entry of the sodium ions in turn causes the release of the calcium ions from the SCR, from the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Depolarization also triggers the intracellular release of the calcium ions, which stimulate exocytosis of secretory vesicles from the oocyte. ठीक है, अगर तुम लोगों को इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा आइडिया है, every what happens, the membrane of the oocyte, it becomes very thick. So it is because of the deposition of these calcium ions. All right, so depolarization और क्या trigger कर रहा है? It is triggering the intracellular release of the calcium ions, which stimulates the exocytosis from the secretory vessels from the oocyte. All right, the molecules released by the exocytosis, they inactivate the ZP3, harden the entire zona pellucida, events called the slow block to polyspermy. So all these things, which have happened, all these things, which are happening, it is going to lead to, or it is going to start the slow block of the polyspermy. देखो अभी हम लोगों ने देखा था fast block to the polyspermy, right? Fast block to the polyspermy में क्या चीज याद रखनी है? Depolarization याद रखना है, ठीक है? Now next, let's talk about the cortical granule reaction. So see, it is exocytosis of the vesicles located just inferior to the oocyte membrane. This process called the cortical reaction releases enzymes that both inactivate the sperm receptor and harden the zona pellucida. Right, zona pellucida harden हो जाएगा तो कोई भी दूसरा sperm जो है वो penetrate नहीं कर पाएगा. And that is the idea of the cortical reaction. Okay, next, now the third point is formation of the pronucleus. After oocyte activation and the completion of meiosis, the nuclear material remaining within the ovum reorganizes as the female pronucleus. कैसे reorganize हो जाएगा? As the female pronucleus. While these changes are underway, nucleus of the spermatozoa swells and it forms the male pronucleus. The rest of the sperm cell breaks down. Right? हम लोगों ने जब मैकेनिज्म ऑफ फर्टिलाइजेशन देखा था वहां पे जो थर्ड स्टेप था वो था एम्फीमिक्सिस. और एम्फीमिक्सिस क्या था? फ्यूजन ऑफ मेल एंड फीमेल प्रोन्यूक्लियाई. ऑलराइट, तो यहाँ पे हम लोगों ने देख लिया दैट द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ द प्रोन्यूक्लियाई हैज हैपेंड. राइट, फीमेल प्रोन्यूक्लियाई बन गया है, मेल प्रोन्यूक्लियाई बन गया है. नाउ once a sperm cell enters a secondary oocyte, the oocyte first must complete the meiosis too, right? Activation of the oocyte is going to happen. It divides into a larger ovum and a small second polar body that fragments and disintegrates, right? We already know what the fate of the polar body is, that it is going to disintegrate. Right, now the nucleus in the head of the sperm develops into the male pronucleus, and the nucleus of the fertilized ovum is going to develop into the female pronucleus. Both the pronuclei are going to fuse, and what is the term that we use for this fusion? The term is amphimixis. Okay, so after the male and the female pronuclei form, they fuse, producing a single diploid nucleus that contains 46 chromosomes, and the fertilized ovum now is called as zygote. Right, तो हमने जब fertilization की story start करी थी, when we started with the process of fertilization, हम लोगों ने definition में यही बोला था, fusion of male and female gamete to produce zygote, which is a diploid structure. So now see, ultimately when we have seen the entire mechanism of fertilization, हमारे पास यहाँ पे diploid structure आ चुका है, which is the zygote. Right, so the fertilized ovum is now called as the zygote, and it restores the normal diploid condition. राइट गैमीट्स के पास 23 क्रोमोसोम्स थे, मेल गैमीट आया, फीमेल गैमीट आया, दोनों का फ्यूजन हुआ एंड देन अल्टीमेटली देयर इज फॉर्मेशन ऑफ अ डिप्लॉयड स्ट्रक्चर व्हिच इज कॉल्ड एज द zygote. Now sperm entry stimulates secondary oocyte to complete its meiosis arrested at metaphase 2 stage and it results in the formation of diploid zygote. Now let's just see a few questions related to the things that we have discussed. Sperm lysins, the enzymatic substances produced by sperms in mammals is known as, all right, so cryanogamon, hyaluronic acid, androgemon, hyaluronidase, right? So we had heard the name hyaluronidase. What is going to be the answer here? Hyaluronidase is going to be the answer here. All right, now let's talk about the next question. Now, in the process of fertilization, this is true. The entry of the sperm activates the egg for completing meiosis. Only one sperm reaches the egg and enters it. Only the acrosome of the sperm enters into the egg. Two haploid nuclei fuse and immediately divide to produce two nuclei which are again haploid. Right? The last statement, it can be clearly eliminated. C पे आएंगे, only the acrosome of the sperm enters the egg. Now in case of humans, the entire sperm enters the egg. So again, ये भी गलत हो गया. Only one sperm reaches the egg and enters it. देखो reach तो बहुत सारे करते हैं, enter एक करता है. Alright, A option देखेंगे, the entry of the sperm activates the egg for completing meiosis. Right? जैसे ही fusion of the plasma membrane होगा, that is going to send a trigger for the activation of the oocyte. It is going to complete its meiosis. So A is a better answer. A is going to be the answer here.